Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing to consider the nomination of Vice Admiral Paul Zukunft to be the 25th Commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard. I also want to thank Vice Admiral, along with his wife, Fran, who sacrifices greatly on behalf of our nation, and so thank you to her and to their family for that sacrifice and for that service. As this committee knows well, the Coast Guard's overall mission is to ensure the safety, security, and stewardship of our nation's waters, which is a massive mission that it performs admirably on a daily basis. For some perspective, it's worth noting the Coast Guard's entire annual budget of about $9 billion is less than the cost to build one aircraft carrier for the Navy, which is around $13 billion. Vice Admiral Zukunft has a long and distinguished career in the Coast Guard and served with distinction during some of the most complex disasters in our nation's history, the Deepwater Horizon spill of 2010. During that disaster, Admiral Zukunft served as the Federal on-scene coordinator, leading more than 47,000 Federal, state, local, and private sector responders to contain and clean up the devastating spill. Currently, Vice Admiral Zukunft is the operational commander of the Coast Guard's Pacific area. This is an area of responsibility that spans half the globe, touching 71 nations and 6 of the 7 continents. In that capacity, he has dealt with transnational criminal activity, increased human activity in the Arctic, and global competition for dwindling fish stocks, among other issues. He's worked with nations like Russia, China, Japan, Canada, and South Korea while conducting combined operations against illegal fishing activity in the western Pacific Ocean. And he's worked to coordinate the efforts of Customs and Border Protection, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the Department of Justice, and local law enforcement agencies at the Coast Guard sector in San Diego, creating a model of interagency cooperation in the fight against transnational criminal operations along the nation's maritime southwest border. Vice Admiral Zukunft also serves on the Coast Guard's Leadership Council, comprised of the Commandant and the service's 5 Vice Admirals, where he has tackled some of the toughest challenges the Coast Guard faces, ranging from budget issues to workforce matters. He currently serves on the Coast Guard's Investment Review Board that finalizes the allocation of funds across the service's acquisition, operations, and personnel accounts. Clearly, Vice Admiral Zukunft is highly qualified, deeply experienced, and prepared to lead the Coast Guard, and I look forward to supporting Vice Admiral Zukunft's nomination, and I again want to express my appreciation for his willingness to continue to serve the nation as the next Commandant of the Coast Guard. Mr. Chairman, I note that we have a deadline to act on this nomination, as Admiral Papp's term as Commandant concludes in May, and I hope that we can act in a timely fashion to have Vice Admiral Zukunft in place by that time. We'll also be hearing testimony today on a later panel from 2 nominees to the Consumer Product Safety Commission. They're Elliot Kaye, who is nominated to be the next chairman of the CSBC, and Joseph Mohorovic, say that wrong, who's nominated to be a commissioner at the CPSC. Currently, the CPSC has 3 commissioners, and should these 2 nominees be confirmed, they'll have a full complement of 5 commissioners here very soon. The CPSC is a creature of Congress, created in 1972 by the Consumer Product Safety Act. As such, its authority is very carefully bounded by the law. It is an independent agency that has the important responsibility of protecting the public from unreasonable risks of injury or death associated with more than 15,000 consumer products such as household products, toys, and sporting goods. The CPSC fulfills its statutory responsibilities by developing voluntary standards with industry, banning products if necessary, and informing and educating consumers, among other things. The Commission, as defined by the CPSA, does not have jurisdiction over certain products such as tobacco and tobacco products, or firearms and ammunition, among other items. Other Federal agencies and commissions have jurisdiction over these types of products, and this is important because I'm always concerned about efforts by agencies to expand their authority, and it's crucial that agencies remain within the jurisdictional procedural boundaries that were mandated by the Congress. Depending on timing with this afternoon's panels, I plan on asking our 2 CPSC noms about their views on some of these jurisdictional procedural boundaries for the CPSC. Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing, and I look forward to testimony from our nominees today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're dealing with, like everybody is, with some serious budget realities that require the Federal Government to do more with less, and you know, unfortunately, the Coast Guard is no exception. So, Admiral, you currently serve, as I mentioned earlier, as a member of the Coast Guard's Leadership Council, which addresses a lot of tough issues facing the Coast Guard, including budget and workforce issues. As Commandant, how would you prioritize the deployment of Coast Guard resources to ensure that drug interdiction targets can be met?
Yeah, we certainly don't do our drug interdictions alone, and we do it in a multilateral process. We have 44 bilateral agreements that grant us broad authorities up to the territorial seas and up to the shorelines of a number of nations that are along the transit zone for drugs destined to the United States. As small as the Coast Guard is, by volume, we interdict over 3 times the volume of drugs by all federal, state, and local law enforcement in the United States. And the drugs that we interdict are usually at the highest purity level before they're diluted and then introduced into our inner cities. But it is a challenge for us going forward. We have a strong partnership with the Navy, but the Navy has aging platforms as well, namely the Perry-class frigates, and as those are being taken out of service, today we use our law enforcement teams on those Navy ships to support drug interdictions. We are doing our best with the resources that I have at my disposal, and as the theater commander in the Pacific, I have deliberately had to withdraw from doing operations in the Western Pacific in support of capacity building for the Pacific Fleet and PACOM commander, because my mission requirements in the Western Hemisphere are such that the opportunity cost of taking those ships out of theater comes at a tremendous cost and missed opportunities in conducting drug enforcement operations. So it is a challenge. There's good news as well. We are able to leverage all of the assets that are available in the national intelligence community, of which the Coast Guard is a member. And much like search and rescue, we're able to take some of the search out of that, and when it comes to drug interdictions, many of those interdictions are led by intelligence of one form or another. So it's made us much more effective, but it does come down to numbers, and it does require resources on the front line to continue that level of effort.
Drug and migrant interdiction are interrelated missions that have a direct impact on our national security. There was a recent hearing before the Senate Armed Services Committee in which former Assistant Secretary of State Roger Noriega noted that terrorist groups have established cells in Latin America and use drug trafficking to fund other terrorist activity. Your experience as operational commander of the Coast Guard's Pacific area, where you spearheaded coordination among law enforcement agencies dealing with transnational crime, should serve you well. In your view, what role does the Coast Guard have in preventing terrorist activity from getting closer to our coastline, and what goals would you have as Commandant in carrying out that mission?
This is probably not just a Coast Guard, but this is a whole of DHS approach when we look at the terrorist threat. As we shore up our defenses, if you will, along our land border, then these activities will find the path of least resistance and then exploit the maritime domain, and vice versa. So it really does require a campaign approach, both land and sea, as we look at threats that are destined for the United States. On that note, the Coast Guard fits very smoothly into the Department of Homeland Security. The 5 missions that Secretary Johnson has set out in the work that we do with our partners that have been illustrated, especially along the southwest border, where we stand up these regional coordinating mechanisms, as you had referred to.
In March, the Inspector General for DHS released a report examining how the Coast Guard had tracked its implementation of recommendations issued in the wake of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The IG concluded that the Coast Guard had not effectively tracked the corrective actions taken in response to these recommendations. Can you discuss the policy changes that the Coast Guard plans to make in response to that report?
I can, and I wrote the Federal On-Scene Coordinator's report immediately following that spill before I relinquished my duties. There's about 250 findings of the 569 that we have prioritized, and not all of those 569 line items are actionable or manifest within the Coast Guard, but certainly applying incident command system principles and how do you build unity of effort across the whole of government. Having the states that support an area contingency plan that prioritize what areas that you will protect, and then the methodologies that you will use to respond to a spill of national significance. And we have subsequently stood up an incident management assist team who today are down in Houston, Galveston, assisting in that endeavor. And certainly I would categorize that as a good whole of government response to a 168,000 gallon oil spill. But I do look to see that we are better prepared One of our challenges going forward is how do you codify all of the knowledge that was gained during Deepwater Horizon, which is measured in terabytes, and then how do you archive that information? And obviously some of it has litigious applications, but other has best management practices. So that's still an area of work that we will continue to work on, and certainly I'll be happy to work with this committee in pushing those best practices forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Kaye, the majority of the time, the voluntary recall system, especially the agency's fast-track recall system, provides a quick and effective means of potentially getting dangerous products off the market. I should say getting potentially dangerous products off the market and out of consumers' hands. However, the agency has come under growing criticism for a slowdown in the pace that recalls are being negotiated, as such delays could ultimately harm consumers. In the past 4 years, the agency has had 3 directors of compliance, and I understand the position is now empty again, which raises concerns about the effect of such turnover on the management of the agency. So the question is, can you provide the committee with information detailing how long it generally takes the Commission to negotiate fast-track recalls and whether that time has increased over the past several years?
Thank you, Senator. So are you asking specifically about fast-track or recalls generally? Because there's actually 2 separate parts of the program. My sense of it is that fast-track itself is generally not controversial. It's required that a company comes basically with a prepackaged recall, including a draft press release, and those things usually move through pretty quickly. There are times, though, when our staff does feel the need to ask for a full report and, in essence, move from the fast track to a slower track to make sure that the information that they're being provided will actually address, and the proposed remedy by the company will actually address the hazard that our staff sees. I think you mentioned, there's a couple of other things that you mentioned in there having to do with voluntary recalls. The Commission does have a draft NPR out on amending the voluntary recall rule or creating or adding a new section to it. The provisions that generated the most attention actually came via amendments at the Commission level. It's not something that I worked on during my time because it wasn't part of my portfolio, but if confirmed, it's something I will spend a lot of time paying very close attention to all of the comments and to make sure that we get it right. I will say that my guiding principles, since I've been at the Commission and when I've worked or at least been involved in recalls, I feel that there are 3 principles at stake. There's speed, which is certainly important. There's sufficiency of the remedy, and then there's the method of communication. I think the right recall is as quick as it needs to be with as sufficient a remedy to address the hazard and as broadcast as broadly as possible. Sometimes those 3 issues are in tension with each other and we're forced to choose. Ideally, they all line up, but it's not just speed, it's not just the type of recall, and it's not just the way it's going to be broadcast. We do look to try to get the complete package, but I'd be happy to keep working with you since this is an area of concern with you if I'm confirmed.
Right. Great. And this question has to do for both, I guess, NOMs. When Congress passed Public Law 112-28, the concern was about the significant cost of third-party testing requirements. And those costs were recognized by the Commission itself in its regulatory flexibility analysis to the testing rule, and by those who are bearing the costs of the very extensive testing requirement. Congress directed the agency to look for and to implement ways to reduce those costs and to report back to Congress if it needed additional authorities to implement opportunities to reduce costs. 3 years have now passed. The Commission has taken no significant action to reduce the testing costs, even though the public and its own staff have put forth concrete recommendations on several occasions. Nor has the Commission asked for additional authorities. So I would, Mr. Kaye, like a commitment from you that you will, within 60 days of being confirmed, provide a plan to this committee outlining specific actions you plan to take to ensure that the agency aggressively implements burden reduction opportunities and a timetable for when those actions will occur. And I would ask Mr. Mohorovic if you would make that same commitment.
Yes, sir.
Senator, I can make that commitment as well.
Okay, great, thank you. I would just, to echo, I guess, what my colleague from Nebraska, or from Missouri covered, and I don't want to confuse that, mentioned earlier, and I hope that both of you will work to sort of change the partisan atmospherics at the Commission. I think it's really important that we have leadership that can create the type of conditions that are conducive to finding consensus. And we're not at the best example of that up here a lot of times, but for the good of the people that, you know, who are affected by the decisions that you make, I hope that you'll be able to address that issue and that both of you will be committed to that end. So and with that, I thank you and would say, to you, Mr. Mohorovic, if you have 3 daughters, save your money, because that's, I had 2 of them get married in the last 6 months.
Senator, I'll do my best. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Senator Ray.